right, well, welcome back to the Synaxis podcast. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Josh.
And today we have a very special guest. It is Simon Scionka, director of Sacred Alaska and some other documentary films. And we're really excited to have you on to talk about your film. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So we had the pleasure of going to a screening in our town. All the parishes came out. It was a good turnout. You were there.
It was a great turnout.
Yeah, it was a really nice event, and the film was outstanding. The Q&A was really insightful, and we're really glad that that happened and that we got to meet you, and now we're here. So
Yeah, thanks.
yeah, it's good. So first of all, I guess we should ask, what was the initial impetus for creating this film? Or actually, I'm sorry, maybe we should start with some kind of synopsis or like a brief summary of, for people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, do you want to summarize it? That'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, just off the top of my head. Yeah, it's great. So Sacred Alaska is a 88-minute feature-length documentary film about Orthodoxy in Alaska. And part of the film talks about the history of how Orthodoxy came to North America through, Russian monks who traveled to Alaska when Alaska was part of the Russian Empire. And we kind of talk about the history, a little bit of that, and the history of a few of the historical saints. And then, forgive me, I've got a little bit of a cough. And then we kind of transition to Orthodoxy today, and particularly Orthodoxy really resonated with a lot of the Native Alaskans, and it just became a part of who they are. And there's a real legacy of that today, if you will, and particularly amongst the Yupik people. And so when you go visit a lot of the Yupik villages, they're Orthodox, and they're Orthodox, to this day, from the time that their churches were founded in their villages, through some of the missionary work of the saints that we talk about. And then we just kind of explore a little bit about, Orthodoxy in Alaska today. What is it? Native Alaskan Orthodoxy, really? Lots of times we know about Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox, and you kind of the big name Orthodox churches. But then there's also this Yupik Orthodox church up there. And it really has, while it's Orthodox, just like the rest of the churches are Orthodox, they also have a lot of just their own unique ways that they, live their life and live their faith. And they can sing a lot of the liturgy in Yupik, and it's really quite beautiful. So that's a little snapshot about what the film's about. And then the film kind of, leads us to, also the saint who's being newly canonized as we speak, Matryoshka Olga, Saint Olga of Kwethluk. When we were filming it, it still hadn't been officially declared by the church, but now the Orthodox Church of America, the OCA, has officially declared her a saint and is going through the canonization process right now. And so we even have, again, part of this legacy in Alaska is it's still producing saints. So we have the saints of the past and saints being produced today. So
yeah, that's brilliant, and it's so beautifully filmed and edited, and it was really personal for me because I spent some time up in Spruce Island and Kodiak, and it definitely transported me back there, seeing Father Andrew and the monastery and the island itself. It was, the filmmaking was so well done, and
oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't. So yeah, well, I guess the first question is like, what was the initial impetus for the film?
Yeah. Well, my co-filmmaker, Silas Carbo, so he was, I'm director, he's producer. We were both the cinematographers, and Silas did the bulk of the editing of the film. And we, the two of us have been working together for a while. And, I do client-based documentary film work. Silas had been working for me. And we ended up just kind of, and we're both Orthodox. And, there's always this desire to kind of, take your kind of craft or your art and like do your own thing, or do something that you care about, and like I'm busy doing work, I do a lot of documentary film work for clients, I get hired for different jobs, and I'm just kind of always, juggling 2 or 3 jobs and working to pay the bills, and it's great, and I've enjoyed it. I mean, I've been able to travel the world and do a lot of really fun and exciting work. But as an Orthodox Christian, oh, it'd be great to do an Orthodox film someday. I mean, I've been thinking that for a dozen years now. It'd be great to do that. It'd be great to do that. Well, then practically, we just had a real slowdown during COVID where work really dried up. And Silas and I were actually sitting right here in this room, just talking about, man, if we could just go do something, go do our own film, do an Orthodox thing, what would we do? And we both had connections in Alaska. We both spent time up there. Silas's Silas's dad, Father Anthony Carbo, he's my priest. He had taken me up there when I was a catechumen 20 years ago. He'd taken Silas even more, and some other group of young people more recently. And we knew some folks up there and had some connections. So we thought, well, why don't we just go up there and try that, and get started and see what we could do. Initially, we kind of had, more of an idea of like, well, the lives of the saints, of course, Spruce Island, St. Herman, it's kind of North America's Holy Land. We could feature that and do some stories around that, and interview Father Michael Alexa, who's featured in our film, and just kind of go from there. And so that's kind of the seeds of it, and when we took that first trip up, it went really well. Father Michael gave us like a wonderful 2-hour interview. But then he kind of pointed us in a particular direction. It was like, you really need to go to the villages along the Kuskokwim River and visit the Yupik villages, particularly where Matryoshka Olga lived. And he just strongly suggested we go do that and see what we would learn there. Well, we couldn't do that on the first year because of COVID lockdowns, and the villages were like, no out of towners, so we didn't go. But we came back, and we kind of built a website, made a teaser, started raising some funds to see if we could, get some funding behind what we wanted to do. And then it just kind of grew from there. We were able to go back the next year, go visit the villages, and then it added a whole other kind of dimension to what we ended up showcasing in the film, based on what we learned spending time with the Yupik people on the Kuskokwim River. So
That's great.
And you said you were a catechumen about 20 years ago. What got you interested in Orthodoxy? I assume you weren't raised Orthodox.
Correct. Yes. I grew up Protestant evangelical, grateful for that upbringing. It was a mostly positive experience. And just did a lot around that growing up. Was grateful for it. Did mission trips and a lot of youth oriented work, and I was on staff at a church for a while doing youth ministry as an assistant. Grateful for that. And then it was a convergence of a number of things. I mean, one was, so when I hit my early 20s, I was just kind of maybe, I wasn't doubting my faith in Christ so much, but kind of my faith in the church and the evangelical church. I was just sort of, I was over it a bit, I guess. I don't know. I've been on staff at churches and kind of done all these things, and it's always sort of some new thing, right? Some new thing to be doing. And so for a while, I just kind of gave up on church for a while. I spent some time in Russia because I had been doing part of the mission work I was a part of was doing summer camps for orphan kids. And I got exposed to the Orthodox Church over there, but it was so foreign. I mean, it was in, I was going to say it was in Russian, but it was actually in Church Slavonic, which is even hard for Russians who weren't well churched to understand what was going on sometimes. But thankfully, the evangelical organization I went with was very positive about the Orthodox Church. They were very friendly towards it. They even worked with a few priests who had run orphanages. So I just had this really friendly kind of exposure to Orthodoxy. Long story short, I met my wife over there. As she came over, we got married here in Colorado Springs, which is where we now live. I knew where an Orthodox church was here in town. I thought, oh, well, she'll feel home going to the Orthodox church. And like, it'd be cool, like, go light some candles, say some prayers like I do in Russia. And that was when I first really encountered it in English, and I wasn't going to church anywhere at the time as an evangelical. And it really just began to resonate with me. I began to like, the Holy Spirit, just really was at work in that during that time. And after a few months of visiting, I was like, oh, this is what I want. Yeah. And my wife, again, yeah, really felt at home. And then we both took the catechumenate class, and it was great because she was Orthodox already, but it really brought her sort of into a more knowledge and understanding and a fuller practice of the faith that she loved. And then it brought me into the church. And then as a married couple, it really brought us together, kind of in our very first year of marriage, which I'm super grateful for because, and then the church, in a good way, took over our lives, right? My priest had a saying. He would tell us, all or nothing. That's what Orthodoxy wants from you, all or nothing. And he had a kind of cool story around why that phrase. But yeah, so that was something that really resonated with me. It was a good challenge, it wasn't like a overly domineering thing. It was just like, yeah, all or nothing. And so I was like, all right, that's what I want. I want all of this. And so we've been there ever since. We've had 4 kids, raising the kids in the church, and been here in the church for 20 years. So, but then the Alaska story. So yeah, real quick, that was a fun one because, I was a catechumen at the time. And Father Anthony was like, hey, you should come on this trip up to Alaska. And that summer, my wife was actually going back to Russia to visit her family. It had been about a year since she moved here. I wasn't able to go because of some work commitments. But I was here. I was like, okay, great. So I went up to Alaska on this like work trip. We went to Spruce Island, and we were doing like re-siding and re-roofing the chapel that's built over St. Herman's grave. And I mean, I just never encountered anything like this. It's like I grew up around, doing a lot of film work. I was still new into the film work, but I was in front of computers all the time. I used to make sound for bands. I did a lot of stuff around like technology and just like live in the woods. And we didn't like, properly shower for like a week. And I'm working with like monks. I'd never been around monks before. There's these guys that just live this life of prayer out in the forest. Like, this is crazy and strange and really cool. And and then working with my hands, which was something I just didn't do very much in life, to just do kind of the building work and all that. And it's like we were there during a fasting period too. So it's like we were like eating ramen noodles, saying prayers, working on the chapel, saying prayers, going to bed, doing it again. And it was incredible. And it truly was a life-changing experience. I'd never been around like the lives of the saints, venerating relics of saints and all that kind of stuff. It's all very, very new, but really transformative in my life. So of course, I mean, I didn't think I was going to make a film about St. Herman or Spruce Island or anything like that at the time. But in hindsight, 20 years later, to be able, well, not quite when we started filming, but it was like 18 years later, going back, I was like, oh my goodness, this is like so incredible for me to sort of be back there, which was a big part of my, intro to Orthodoxy, if you will.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things about the film that I really loved was the way you portrayed the native spirituality and how receptive it was to Orthodoxy and the things that they already had. I think Father Michael Alaska put it really beautifully when he said that it was something along the lines of like they were open to the fulfillment of what they already knew. And so when like Saint Innocent and they encountered these saints, it spoke to them on this really deep level. And they were able to accept the revelation of Christ. And the way you portrayed that in the film was really great. And I kind of want to hear what it was like being in those villages. I mean, how long did you live with the natives, and what was the filming with them like?
Yeah, we were there. I mean, it was a relatively short period, but our big trip up there, we spent a good week or so along the Kuskokwim River, mostly visiting 2 villages, and just, yeah, spending, a number of days with them. And then we went back in the wintertime for another trip to the same spot when we went for the Feast of Theophany. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, to Father Michael's point in the film, the big part of what happened for them was, very often you see and hear sometimes these stories of, if you broadly look at Christianity and evangelism of like natives and kind of forced conversions or at least manipulative sometimes conversions. And there really is this sense that with the Native Alaskans, it was very natural for them when they heard the stories of Christ and of the Christian faith presented. It resonated with them and it connected to things that they already inherently had in their own kind of native spirituality, if you will. And so very much so it became this more of a fulfillment of a lot of things for them, kind of a completion. Now, there's some things that needed to go. Well, sure, there were some things that needed to go. We don't really cover that in the film, but you can read Father Michael's books on that, and he talks, a lot more, through that. But to just find these connection points within how they saw, the spiritual life of, the plants, the animals themselves, nature, their environment, and this kind of connectivity. And very much so, like, we're in our modern world, we're so disconnected from things. We're disconnected from our food source. We're disconnected, from really nature very often. We're even very much disconnected from each other, even though we're connected, quote unquote, through technology. We're on some levels even more disconnected than ever in true kind of human relationship. And so I think, part of, spending the time up there now in the modern context, it was just, it was a really impactful experience to just really, on many levels, slow down. The pace of life just moves differently in the villages. It's a quieter, it's simpler. There certainly is technology, and I mean, they're using technology. They have smartphones, and there's tech around, some of what they do, but there's still a real, like, I mean, they live off, they very much so live off the land, and they live the subsistence life, and not in subsistence in a good way of like, they fish and they gather, they hunt to be able to have food for the winter, for the next year, to feed their families, their neighbors, and themselves, and so they're very sharing in their community too, which was really just an amazing thing to see. There's a scene in the film where we don't really say it explicitly, but you can kind of pick up on what's going on. The one priest, Father James, he has this huge catch of fish in his boat. And he's putting it in buckets and then driving his four-wheeler around the village, and he's delivering fish to people. It's like, that wasn't just for his family. You know what I mean? It was for the neighbors, for the elder who can't get out and fish, for so and so down the way. And they do that a lot within their community, and it's really quite powerful. And a lot of that then just can serve as a simple example, simple but profound example of what does it mean to love your neighbor. It's like Christ calls us to, what does it mean to be Orthodox? Well, it's to love your neighbor. One of the priests in our film says that. And so they live that out in this very sort of real and tangible way, where they serve one another, they feed one another. If someone needs wood, they give them wood, and they just do that, and it is really beautiful. And God willing, part of the hope in presenting some of those stories in the film is that it would be an example to us, to say, oh, how can we in our own community, in our own environment, wherever God has placed us, we're not in a small village and life doesn't work that way here, but how can we be attentive to one another and each other's needs, and serve and love each other in community, in our neighborhood, at the place where we work, and sort of through that find our work out our salvation. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and that goes into that one of the main themes that goes throughout the film is the idea of becoming a real person.
right,
I
yeah.
think the name Yupik means real person, and you sort of partially answered this question already, but I wonder if you could speak to that idea of like what
Sure.
does it mean to become a real person?
Yeah. So for those who maybe haven't seen the film yet, but one of the themes in the film is, if you just said, is, the word Yupik, and a lot of the native names, often it means real person or real people, the real people. And so there's a couple things in that. And one is that, this idea of what does it mean to become, fully human? And like that also connects to our Orthodox faith, because that's very much like, what does it mean to become a saint? Well, it means to become fully the person that God created and intended us to be. And so you can look at that in different ways, like to be a real person, to be fully human, to become a saint. And so we have a little bit, we play with that a little bit in the film, of where these things overlap, or are kind of the same thing, and you can look at it both on the practical as well as the spiritual. Father Michael talked about, he said, you know, in the Yupik understanding, to become a real person, it's like, well, you're not born a real person. It takes a lifetime to become one, and that's why they venerate their elders, right? Because the elders are the ones who have lived long enough to sort of learn how to become kind and humble and loving. Well, again, what is an elder? Well, the saints, like the saints are like our elders, right? They're the ones who, live their life in a way through their prayer and repentance, who became kind, humble, and loving, and full of Christ. And there are examples, and so we kind of, with both the theme of like real person and saints and elders and saints, we kind of, we do a lot of that in the film. And it's just, again, I think I mentioned this a minute ago, but well, I mean, maybe just a personal takeaway for me is this idea too of just attentiveness. Like I want to be attentive to those things. I want to pay attention to that, um, and in my own life, and see it's easy to just kind of, stay busy and keep doing all your things, but like to slow down and like recognize like the elder in your community who's always at church saying their prayers and quiet. Maybe they sit in the back or the corner or whatever, but they're always there saying their prayers. And like, there's something to that, you know what I mean? And that sort of simplicity and that humility of showing up, and being there. you know we've had some discussions around that in my own parish. Most of the founders of our parish are no longer with us. I think there's maybe one or two left. It was founded in the 70s, but it's like, it's easy for all the young people showing up to just like, oh, we're just at this kind of big, thriving Orthodox community. And it's like, well, there are some really quiet, humble people who served and were here when there was only a dozen people. And through their prayers, this church is here today. You know what I mean? And to just remember that we're connected to that. We're connected to those stories, And so there was a lot of that I experienced, too, just because it's on some levels, I think some of that just becomes a little more tangible there, because they're very, when you ask them about themselves and their community, well, that's what they talk about. They talk about their elders. They talk about the people who were their influences, and I'm here today because of my aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa who lived a life of prayer, who taught me my faith. You know what I mean? And so they're very connected, which is really quick.
I love that.
Was there anything that you maybe wanted to put in the film that didn't make it, or something that you were aiming to put in that maybe didn't happen up in Alaska?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, some of it was more just kind of maybe fun stuff. One was Well, we did actually, we had a scene, there's still footage in the film, but we had a whole segment on Father Alexander, who runs the dogs. He's a dog musher. And he actually does races and everything. Like, he's like super into it. He raises the dogs and trains them and runs the dogs. So we had a short little story about him in the film that we ended up taking out because it just was like too long. And we could never find the right place for it to fit where it kind of made sense in the overall narrative. It always felt like well, that was cool, but why is that in there? You know what I mean? So that was actually something that we did film that we ended up taking it out of the film. At some point, we may release that separately as just a extra behind the scenes short kind of a thing.
Nice.
We Silas did a nice job editing that together and has it sort of as its own short. So it's really quite good. I had this dream of I wanted to film someone building an old, like the traditional kayak out of wood, and then just like film them, in like native garb, kayaking between the Aleutian Islands, something like that, just kind of some big epic shot, right?
Mm.
So like I had some things like that I wanted to do that, we just didn't end up doing. We briefly mentioned Unalaska and the Aleutian chain, but that was an area we wanted to go film. But just timing wise and budget wise, we could never pull it off. I mean, it's like minimum $1,000 a pop to like get there and then to get around. I mean, it just was like, and then part of it was just timing and shoot schedule and stuff. We just couldn't quite pull it off. But yeah, those are it. I mean, the lives of some of the other saints too. I mean, we had to pick, and it was hard because we sort of like, okay, which stories do we want to tell? And then we kind of picked the three that made the most sense to the overall narrative of what we were doing in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But the Saint Juvenali, Saint Peter the Aleut, who was a martyr. I mean, there's some other saints who also came up to Alaska. Father Michael Alexa had this really great story he loved to tell about he called it the Six Saints of Sitka, which is hard to say fast many times. The Six Saints of Sitka. So he always loved talking about that because there were a number of saints that kind of came through and all served in Sitka. So yeah, there were just other stories like that would be great to tell. So some people ask if we'll do follow-up or continuation. Who knows? Maybe we'll see, because there's definitely some more beautiful stories to tell up there.
Yeah, I think you chose well. I mean, Saint Herman, Saint Innocent, obviously those are two giants. And I really liked learning about Saint Yakob. I haven't heard much of him before, and I think they even mentioned in the film he kind of was forgotten about for a while until his memory was sort of rejuvenated.
Yeah, there were some fascinating stories. I'll be broad because I don't want to mess up the details, but I mean, he took like copious amounts of like notes and journals over the years, and those were like there's a whole segment of them that were miraculously found in an old bell tower of like an abandoned church.
Wow.
And so I remember hearing some story about that. Someone was like, "Oh, well, just go up to the bell tower," and they found this box, and then it had all these journals of Saint Yakob. I mean, it was just amazing. So, so sometimes those things, yeah, these kind of stories, they fall by the wayside for a while, and then things kind of get rediscovered. And see, one of the reasons why we ended up featuring him too was because he was this really interesting sort of critical link for what we were wanting to tell in our overarching story. Was he was Native Alaskan, but then he was also sent to serve another tribe where he didn't actually even speak their language. You know what I mean? So like it was kind of this. So he was Native, then went, got trained, came back as a priest, first Native priest, and then was sent as a missionary to the Yupik people. And then the Yupiks are the ones who we, kind of focus on in the second half of the film. So he was like an important bridge too, for us. In that sense. But yeah, I mean, some of his stories from his journals are quite amazing. So
that's awesome. Something I was wondering about, uh, did you run into any like significant difficulties while you were making the film? And if so, like how did you overcome them?
Yeah. Honestly, we didn't really have very many difficulties. I'm grateful. I mean, it's normal for, uh, projects and films, like this to, you know, to have that. I mean, occasional, I mean, but I mean, in hindsight, when I think about it, I mean, anything that was a difficulty was pretty minor.
Mm.
Sometimes just logistical challenges, or things that didn't quite go the way we hoped. But that's also part of the journey and the experience and the learning curve, Like, for example, I mean, one of our difficulties was, we go to a place with very, relatively few days and precious hours to do as much filming as possible. And then you run into unknown variables or things you don't know, the plans are changing. It was very hard to go to the villages. It's very hard to make plans in advance. And that's part of just how the way that it works with them, the culture. So we had to sort of learn to just adjust to that a little bit. We really spent our first day, just kind of meeting people, sitting around the dinner table, chatting with folks. And we really wanted to get to work and film stuff. Well, that was actually really necessary in a good way, that we had to slow down and just kind of start to sort of pick up on their sort of mode and way of being, and build some trust with them, build some relationship with them. We couldn't just come in, with um, kind of bulldoze in and like do our thing. You know what I mean? And so that was important to sort of have that time. And so on one level, a difficulty, but that also really turned into a reward and a benefit, if you will. So
Mm.
Did you guys end up staying with people?
we never got stranded anywhere, or
Yeah.
filming in the cold was pretty challenging a few times. But again, just part of the journey.
Did you guys end up staying with people you filmed with? Or
Yeah, they usually put us up in a couple of different buildings. Once we stayed in like kind of like a sort of an abandoned house. They had actually had this one house that was dedicated. I think it was like the COVID house. It was like, or the quarantine house. It was like the quarantine house during COVID. If someone came back or ended up sick, they'd put them in this house. So we just stayed one time in another time we stayed in a building that was like partially under construction. It was like a government building that they were building. And then another time we stayed in like the one side of the building was like the office, the local tribal office, but then they had like a guest quarters, where they could host people with like 2 bedrooms and a kitchen, and it was really simple and quite nice, you know what I mean? So
Did you stay at St. Michael's Skeet?
no, we didn't. We actually, yeah, through like a relational connection, um, we had access to a house that's on Spruce Island,
Oh, nice.
about like a 15-minute or so hike from the monastery. So we were able to stay at a home there.
Cool. Are there any like experiences you had during this process that really stand out to you that you remember fondly? I'm sure there are many, but
Yeah, I mean, many for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, any chance to go to Spruce Island is incredible. I mean, it really is, as they talk about in the film, and as you know, having been there before. I mean, it's just a holy place, and to stand underneath these huge trees that just go up. I mean, it's like an outdoor cathedral, and it's just a really incredible place. Um, but yeah, relationally, there are a number of people. I mean, we had great encounters with everybody that we spent time with. But particularly when we went out to New Halen and spent time with Father David Askok and his wife, Matryoshka Gladys, out there. And they're older, they've been there a long time, just serving, and just such lights, and just beautiful people. And just some of our encounters with them were really uh, just really life-giving, and they took us out berry picking, and we just got to, like, I don't know, there was just this real connection there where we really, and it was actually the final filming trip that we did was that one. And so, I mean, we could have finished the film without it, but we felt like there was a piece missing. And I'm so glad we went there because there was quite a bit that we got on that trip that became a big, big part of our film. So that was really incredible. Something not in the film was that, the Yupiks do if you're familiar with like banya culture,
Yeah.
like Russian banyas, or like it's like a sauna, a steam room. Well, they have a Yupik banya, and so it's a big part of their culture to do the Yupik banya, and it's hot. I mean, they make these. They're small. They're small, little. Like you don't really stand up in them. You more kind of hunch down and sit on a little bench, and they like to try to cook the outsiders. So we got treated, but we got treated really well, and it was, those are really powerful, just human encounters, where you just get to really feel brought into kind of a really unique and sacred space that is very much, part of their local culture and tradition, and just like meet the neighbors and hang out in the banya. That was really pretty special. So yeah, Silas and I had a few good times with the folks doing that too.
Love that. You got anything?
Yeah, what's the future of the film look like? Are you aiming to do any more film festivals, or are you just going to release this on something like Amazon Prime? Or
So what's coming up with the film? Yeah, we're riding out a few more months of like theatrical and private event screening. So that's kind of how the film has been in this kind of phase one of release, has been festivals, which has been very few, but festivals, theatrical and private event screenings. So that could either be like a theater showing the film or a parish showing the film. If a parish is equipped, like some parishes have like really nice parish halls with a projector and other things like that. So we've done a few of those as well. So kind of private event screenings and theater screenings. And that's just been great. It's been great. I mean, all the folks who have been hosting it, it seems like it's been going very well. They had great turnout, really engaging, good outreach opportunity, even to just invite the neighbors to, or friends and family to. And so that's gone well. Then we're moving into, I'm also trying to do that on a foreign level now a little bit. So I'm trying to finish up Greek, Romanian, Russian, and a few other subtitles so we can show the film in a few other countries.
Nice.
And then, fall going into winter, we hope to have the film more widely available, so will be purchasable, rentable, video on demand, streaming, probably on Amazon, probably not on Netflix, without a distributor. We're just kind of doing this very grassroots, so we'll see. But nowadays it's fine. I mean, grassroots, you can do that. I mean, I can put it up on YouTube and just kind of do that myself that way even. So there's sort of a lot of options how you can pull that stuff off nowadays.
Nice.
It's not quite as limited. Like if you don't have a distributor, it's like good luck ever showing your film. It's like no, you can get it into movie theaters. You can get it on. What's hard to do, and I know it's been a little frustrating. People who are following along, it's like, when's it coming to my city? Well, I mean, part of that, it just takes a local host willing to kind of help us bring it there. Because like what you can't do easily without a distributor or some distribution network is say, put it in every Cinemark across the United States for a one-night event. You've got to get, like there's Fathom events. They do a lot of the Chosen, like the Chosen series and some other stuff, the theaters, and some other, family-friendly content, whatnot. But they, you could get them to, if they're working as a distributor, then they can do these kind of big events where you do coast to coast. And again, I've been, trying to see if I could get something like that, but nothing. It's hard. It's hard to kind of make those right connections and make those things happen. So,
did you say
by the end of the year?
Great. That's awesome. Did you say that there would be like hard copy, like DVD kind of thing going on too?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to have DVDs and Blu-ray available as well. And part of that's just it's not hard to do. That's just a, kind of production cost. And
Mhm.
again, then the trick in that is distributor and fulfillment, But I've got a couple of leads I need to follow up on maybe making a deal with somebody that would do fulfillment on DVDs. So
How would an interested party go about getting Sacred Alaska played in one of their local theaters? Would they contact you through email? Or?
yeah, it's very grassroots. Just contact me through email. So Simon@sacredalaskafilm.com. And you can, just let me know where you're at, what parish you're at. And then I've got like an intro email that outlines the process. We charge a small screening fee that helps us cover overhead costs, and then we can make the film available. But then a local host has to do it's a little bit of hard work, depending on what you can do. But I mean, typically, you can contact local theater. Typically the local theater is going to be very willing to do it if you'll rent the theater. So if you can put the upfront capital to rent the theater, and then you charge ticket prices, and you should be able to recoup all your costs. But it takes a little bit of upfront. And sometimes churches, very often, churches have been very willing to just, they'll invest in that, do that, and then you can recoup your costs. So that's kind of the snapshot. There's a few other ways it can be structured. And so that's why just reach out to me and we kind of figure it out. But that's been the most common model.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad they organized it in our town, and I hope a lot of other people do it too. Like I said, it was a great event, and it
was very successful too. We had
Yeah.
to get a bigger theater. We had to go to the main theater because the smaller ones didn't have enough seats. So
yeah, no, it's
it was a
great.
good
Yeah,
turnout.
the theater was very gracious too to upgrade that stuff with no additional costs. And so, yeah, and lots of times, see, the theaters for them, these events are kind of risky, like, oh, you're going to show some like one-off documentaries, sometimes like, 6 people come to documentaries, you know what I mean? So they just like don't know what to expect, but the way that the Orthodox Church is able to sort of like promote it, then you get multiple, like, at our showing there in, you guys were in Sacramento, right?
Santa Rosa.
Santa
Were
Rosa.
you guys in Santa Rosa? Okay, I was like, we did the 2 back to back, so they blur my head.
Yeah.
So in Santa Rosa, it was like, well, you get multiple communities involved, and it's not too hard to get 100+ people into a theater. So,
Mhm.
and the night before in Sacramento, I think we had even more people, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it was good. It went well.
Yeah, it really did. I hope more people are able to set something up like that too. But I think we're coming up on about an hour. Maybe we should start wrapping it up. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any plugs you want to give out? Stuff like that?
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm grateful. The way we've done this has been, just kind of building a grassroots audience online. People are following along on our Instagram page, Facebook, and we don't post a whole lot, but we just kind of keep people in the loop. I've got an email list that's grown to around 1,000 people, which is awesome, and we just kind of share as we have news coming up. I'll probably like if I do a podcast like this, I usually send it out to our email list and let people know, they can watch the interview or read a review or whatever it is. So, and yeah, we're still, we've still got work to do in getting the film out. If anyone loves the film and loves what they do and they want to donate to Sacred Alaska, there's a way to do that on our, Sacred Alaska Film website. We're grateful for the help. And God willing too, we'll do more Orthodox film. This was, for me as a filmmaker, this was my first attempt to say, okay, can I raise money and can I make an Orthodox film? And then can I get it out there, And so we're halfway through the getting it out there phase. And so far it's been going well. And yeah, I'd love to do it again. I'd love to do it again. So
Yeah, that reminds me. I'll definitely put the donate link in our description. But there was another project you guys were donating to also, right? To send Native Alaskans to St. Innocent's Cathedral in Russia.
Yeah, so that was a special fundraiser that kind of happened at those two screenings.
Okay.
So the local host asked. So yeah, if the yeah, and I'm happy to, like, with the film, if we can raise money for the church in Alaska, I've been happy to have some of these screenings do that. And so some folks have wanted to do that. So yeah, they had a very specific project in mind with helping some of the Alaskan priests be able to go over to Russia to the church where Saint Innocent used to serve, and be able to then even serve Yupik liturgy there. And so then they've been building this connection, kind of on some levels, reestablishing even somewhat of a stronger connection between some of the churches there in Russia and Alaska where a connection exists. So yeah, so there's that project going on. The Diocese of Alaska, is on some levels quite poor compared to the rest of Orthodoxy in North America. So there's some initiatives to help the church up there too. So
That's great. That actually reminded me of something else in the film. I think you go to Alaska for a little, I mean, not Alaska, to Russia for a little bit and show St. Innocent's Cathedral. Did you guys travel out there for that too?
yeah,
Cool.
well, yeah, I was actually already there on a personal note.
Okay, nice.
So we were back in Russia visiting my wife's family, and so I I often travel with a camera, but I brought my drone along, and I brought my drone along on that trip as well. And then I got permission because I knew his relics were at the the Dormition Cathedral at the Holy Trinity Lavra, Sergei Posad. So the relics of Saint Sergius of Rodnesh are there. There's a lot of, it's like rich history. There's really it's one of the main centers of like all of Orthodoxy in Russia. And his relics are there. So then I got permission to film there. So yeah, that was like my family and I had like a 2-day stopover there at that monastery and got to take a few shots, which was great. So.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It's been really
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Yeah, man. It was our pleasure. And we'll definitely put all the links down in the description. And you got anything?
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. The movie's great. We said it before in our interview. I think it's the best Orthodox film I've seen. It's I thought I would be biased anyways, like being Orthodox. I thought I would like it, but it's put together so well. It's edited beautifully. The story like comes about really organically. None of it seems forced. It was really good, and we really encourage people to see it.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
God bless.
Take care.